A giant hole is opened up in the ground. On one side, your house is teetering, just on the edge of falling in. On the other side, your children are clinging to the edge with a very weak grip. You can only save either your home or your children. Which side do you run to? Welcome to the Pro Say Divorce Podcast, where you can learn how to turn mediocre mediations into major successes. My name is Tom Davis, and I'm a certified professional divorce mediator in Denver, Colorado. I've helped thousands of clients over the past 2 decades reach success rates and outcomes that are significantly higher than what is typical. In each episode, I will share valuable insights, practical skills, and tools you can utilize right away to improve your mediation outcomes. And I'll serve as your guide through the potentially confusing process of divorce. Better days are coming, starting now. Everyone I know would run to save their children. However, most couples prepare more for a mediation session focused on the outcome of their home. Almost no preparation goes into the mediation session where the children's needs are discussed and the plans on how you and your co-parent are going to meet those needs are decided. Most couples come in with a depreciation on the impact of their behavior and the conflict on the children, and a prioritization on certain aspects of the parenting plan that is maybe not even connected to what the kids are going to be concerned about in the future and what's actually going to be long-term important. And I think part of that is just because, your parents haven't gone through it yet, so you don't know, right, the long-term effects of these things. And you're really in the immediate situation of a bunch of things. You're trying to figure out financial security. You're trying to deal with the change in your relationship and all these things. And so it's a lot to take in, and you're really focused and feeling the things that affect you. And the kids can unfortunately be minimized in that. And people can rationalize, you know what, I'm doing the best I can, which is probably very true, to be very fair. But they put their focus on these things, and what's in front of them is filling out a parenting plan, and what's in there is some topics, and there's overnights, and everyone intuitively or has been advised that overnights are a direct contributor to what the child support's going to be. So more overnights equals either more child support or you pay less child support if you have more overnights, either way. So overnights become something that you connect to. Mutual decision-making becomes something you connect to as a threat to your fairness evaluation of the parenting plan. And because these things are what's in front of you. So that becomes the currency in which you negotiate. Let's talk about overnights. Let's talk about who's going to decide school. And I want to have decision-making on it. I want to have some control in my life. Parents may feel like they're losing control or don't have control. And so you fight for control for the kids. And, they end up focusing on these different parameters that kids could really care less about, most likely. And so I wanted to talk about what's in the plan, proper mindset for, the mediation session, how to prepare for it. There's also, we'll touch on the parenting class. There's a parenting after divorce class, at least here in Colorado, people have to go through. We'll touch on that. And I'll share some stories along the way, and we will try to get through a bunch of things here because I wanted to put all this in one big session, but it's going to be too big. So this is going to be broken up into a 2-parter. So part 1 we'll go through today, and then we'll pick up on part 2 next week. And if you listen to both, you'll get the whole thing. But even then, everything you hear, that's just the tip of the iceberg on everything you hear. There's so much more I can't get into in this short medium, in the minutes we have together. So let's get going. What's covered in a mediation? So let's talk about the mediation session. Again, this is typical. as my understanding is, but I can definitely speak to my side of, my practice and how I approach it. I usually will do the parenting plan mediations before we do the financial mediations. We want to prioritize the children. We want to think through what is in their best interest without the complications of financials, because that's going to take a lot of attention and be in your mind um, while you work through those issues. And we don't want that in the same space as thinking about the children. So we want to take care of this first. We want to do the part that is probably most important. Again, if your house is going into a big black hole, or your children, you'll run and get your kids. And so we prioritize them first. And then once we figure out the best situation for that side of things, we can adjust the financials. So just at least from my experience, if you happen to be one of those parents who says, I need half the overnights because I want to reduce child support, but you both agree that it's okay that you have less overnights, and we might be able to adjust the child support in some way so that the kids get the parenting plan that's appropriate for them, and you get some relief on the child support, and we can figure out a way to handle that so that you don't have to use that as a justification for entering into a parenting plan because you feel like you have to force the overnights to get the benefit on the child support. Let's focus on the kids first. We'll figure out the financials later. So the topics that are typically covered in the mediation are going to be decision-making and parenting time. And that's because those are the sections on the court parenting plan. And so how you're going to make decisions together and how you're going to share time together become the topics in the mediation. But there is a lot of stuff that can go into that. Most people show up cold to this, and I guide them through it. I would really like to change that. And so I'm putting this podcast episode out there to have some material that parents can come in and get a glimpse into what's about to happen. And I'm working on classes for pre-mediation parenting classes. These are different than, I think anyway, I think there's a need for this because your parenting after divorce classes focus on, your behavior, kids' needs, things like that, but they don't really transform or translate that into parenting plan speak. And so you kind of walk out with this conceptual level of we shouldn't argue and, we shouldn't bash the other parent, and kids have separate needs. Okay, got it. Now let's talk parenting plan. How do we translate that? And so I end up doing that for clients along the way, but it would be a lot more effective if we could get into a pre-mediation class, which I'm working on, to help translate those principles and ideals through the process that is your natural way of doing things. So it's got your personality and your strengths and weaknesses in it. And that gets translated into the parts of the parenting plan that'll make it more successful. So, but most people come in, like I said, without any type of understanding of that. And so we end up focusing on overnights and things. And so I think it's important to think about the mindset that goes into it. This is the stuff that is in between the lines of the decision-making. And it is, it's incorporated in there. The spirit of it is in there. Whereas if you just think about the flat decision-making and parenting time, you could probably fill out a parenting plan in a very short amount of time if you don't think about it. But it's the thinking about it that is going to provide the value down the road. And so let's talk about the importance of having a good plan. As I tell my clients, the best thing that can happen is that we'll spend 4 or 5 hours, let's say, coming up with a comprehensive parenting plan, and then you never look at it again, which is to say that as problems come up for the two of you, you become problem solvers together instead of, legalistic about it. And if someone's late, you don't want to be the person who pulls out the plan and says here 6:00. Can't you read? Why are you always here at 6:15? Don't you respect me? That's not a good use of your time, energy, and the parenting plan. So if that's a problem, just say, hey, it looks like we're having trouble getting here at 6. And if we made it 6:30, would that take the pressure off and we could just work together on that? And if that works out for the two of you, just do it, right? By mutual agreement, just do it. There's only 2 things I say don't do on your own for sure. And that is permanently change your regular parenting time, the weekly schedules, or child support. There's too much long-term unintended consequences for those if you change those and we don't update the court order. Where possible, you want your parenting plan to be in sync, that the court has ordered to be in sync with your actual activities. And over time, you may change your pickup times a little bit. You may change the way you do things. The kids grow a little bit. New situations come up. Old concerns you had, previous concerns you had don't turn out to be that important, so you abandon those. And you start to drift in practice from what's documented from the court-ordered parenting plan. And that's okay. Some of that's very, very normal. But you don't want it to get too far out of sync, or it can create some legal problems for you down the road. So I say there's two forms of value that the plan has. One is that it does define, what's going to happen if someone slips, hits their head, becomes a different person in the future, and they start operating in a way that you're not used to or expect, and suddenly you don't have the same shared values about things. All you're going to have is what was written down in that plan. So that brings me to the worst thing we can do is not invest the time to come up with a comprehensive plan. And in 4 or 5 years, something's going to happen like that, and you're going to open up the plan and expect it to say something, and it's not going to say it. That could be, depending on what it is, one of the darkest days you have in the divorce. And it's really impactful to think that day could come 4 years after the actual divorce. Like you think we've been through the worst of it, we're all recovered, we're good, we're doing great. Surprise. It happened to me, and it happens to a lot of parents who don't take the parenting plan part seriously. So legally covering yourself for when things don't go well is part of the plan. The other part of the plan that's not documented so much, or is the opportunity to incorporate this, is not typically embraced by parents on their own. I bring this in myself to my meetings with clients, but it is setting proper expectations with each other. So it's not just legally what you're agreeing to do, but it's the expectation setting, which is a whole, another level of what you're going to do so that you have proper expectations. So even little things like I had clients come in who had been arguing for years. They weren't my clients, from originally, but they came in as post decree. So they had been arguing for years, and they were arguing about child support, not what it should be, but what it covered. And she thought it covered nothing, and he said it covers everything, right? So he shouldn't have to pay for any back to school supplies or any children's clothes or anything because he pays child support. And she said, that's ridiculous. That doesn't pay for any of that. You need to also pay for, their groceries and help me with rent and everything else. So they both had misinterpreted what child support is for and had been arguing about it. And when I've met with them, I said, did your mediator or attorneys or anyone, did anyone sit down and explain to you what child support is supposed to cover and what your responsibilities are outside of that? And they said, no, it's pretty clear. Child support is for the support of the child, so it's everything. And she said, no, that's just the money you get for having a child. You then need to split all the bills on top of that. And I was like, okay, so they did not have good expectations. And that's what I'm talking about here, is closing those gaps, finding those potential misunderstandings now when it's cheaper, faster, better to accommodate those things is what I'm talking about. So that's one of the benefits of not rushing through this process. Okay, so the importance of the plan, that's basically, it is important to do that. I mean, you can download the JDF 1113 here in Colorado. That's the parenting plan form. You can fill that sucker out in about 10 minutes. And a lot of people look at that and say, what are we going to talk about for 4 hours, 5 hours? I've seen the form. It takes 10 minutes to fill it out. Okay, yeah, I could fill it out in 10 minutes too. And that should be a problem, right? How we co-manage our parenting enterprise post-divorce should not be able to be filled out in 10 minutes, right? It's of no quality. So that ought to be the first red flag. And so There's nothing in there. And sort of the way to think about it is, if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. So if there's nothing in the plan that says you can't meet someone at a bar on Tuesday night and move them in with your kids on Wednesday morning, then that's what you may do. It's kind of the Wild West in that regard. So if there's no language in there to mitigate how you introduce the children to new potential relationships of yours, then it's up to your discretion. And at that point, you are held to the standard of what is child abuse or child neglect, which there's a fairly high bar for. And so while these activities, everyone would clearly, most likely agree would be a bad idea, right? Meet someone on one day, move them in with the kids the next. It's not illegal. So if we don't talk about these things and put these things in the plan, and that your co-parent becomes a different person in 3 years and they do this to you, that's going to be a real dark day for you. It happened to me, and it was a real dark day. It was a real surprise that our plan wasn't that good, actually. And we had went with a really top-notch mediator, but there were a lot of gaps in the plan. And so one of the things I do is I look at all the work I do, people that come back either from other mediators, or even if I have revisits for my own clients, I take note of what it is that their problem is. And I try to figure out, is there a way we could have dealt with that earlier to avoid this? And if I spot an opportunity, then I put it into the agenda for the next clients. And so over time, this has gotten into a pretty good list of tested material to proactively deal with things before you get caught off guard down the road. So that's the idea for the plan, is to lock down your agreement. So if someone does become a different person, that you still have this plan that governs your behavior and your rights and obligations regarding these things that could affect your kids and you in the future. So that's the importance of it. Now, there are 3 principles to the parenting plan that I create. And in general, I think there's most other plans that I've seen and experiences I've heard of and been exposed to over the last 19 years really focus on 2. And I think the court focuses on 2, which is the highest standard. And so the 3 parts of the parenting plan are your rights, your legal right to participate in the development of your children. That's important. I would argue the least important compared to the other 2. The second one is what's in child's best interests. So if there's a conflict in what you're legally, allowed to do, what your legal rights are in terms of participating in the development of your children, let's lean toward what is in kids' best interest. And that is the standard for most mediations, most parenting plans, most courts. I argue it's inadequate, deceptively and magnificently inadequate. I think there's a more important third one that should be set as both a part of the plan and also really embraced by the parents as an expectation with each other. And that one is, how do we eliminate, or as much as we can, remove conflict for the benefit of our children? That's the most important, because it doesn't matter who gets the extra overnight. No kid's ever come back at 30 or 25 and said, "Hey, Dad, hey, Mom, I really appreciate you getting that extra overnight. Made all the difference in the world to me. I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for that. Thank you so much. I'm really glad you dug in on that and fought for that. And the 8 years in court for that was so great. Thank you." No kid's ever done that or will do that. That's not what's important to them. And so why we spend time on things that aren't that important is part of the conundrum, right? You don't know about those things as you're starting out. You find out later, here's what was important, here's what's not important. And so we really want to understand conflict is the worst thing outside. I'm talking in your normal situations. Obviously, if there's child abuse or, really obvious things, obviously those are need to be dealt with. But in your typical situation, the biggest thing that you can do to protect your kids and help them adjust and recover and be good people and be successful is to get rid of conflict. And I don't mean hide it. I don't mean suppress it. I don't mean disguise it. And I I definitely don't mean involve the kids in it so they get a front row seat, and why you explain it to them, why it's necessary, and that you're doing it on their benefit. Seen a lot of that. That's not what I'm saying. Um, I mean, really, really stop doing it. Like, learn why it's so harmful and why it's an impossibility to manage. A lot of parents think they can manage the level and impact of divorce conflict on their kids. It's something they can manage, and you cannot do it. You have no idea. How can you manage something if you don't even know the quantity of it that's being received and the impact it's having internally? So real quick, I'll give you a real good example. Like, you can be flat out just arguing with each other at the parenting time exchange. And while that's not good, and you may think, wow, that's going to be the worst memory of my kid's life, seeing their parents argue at an exchange like that outside the house. You may be shocked to find out that you go upstairs to take a phone call and argue with your co-parent about something. Kids downstairs watching TV. You go upstairs, start talking. It gets a little out of hand. And then you may not even know that your kids crept upstairs because they know something's up. They want to hear what's going on. They're concerned about their safety and what's going on. They're concerned about you. So they eavesdrop and they hear you say some things to their other parent, and they realize they're fighting about you. And that may break your heart. And that may be one of the worst memories they ever have. And you don't even know it happened. You can't tell me you can manage that. You can't control the flow of how much damage goes into a kid's heart because of conflict. You don't have the ability to do that. No one does. Your best bet is to eliminate it. And so learn what it takes to get a new framework, not have deep positions on things that you want to argue about. Always think about, see your kids in this really positive, happy, productive, successful state. And what do I got to do to make sure they have that future? And that becomes your job as a parent. And that may not have anything to do with who gets Christmas on odd years or, any of that stuff, or someone not carrying their weight on something and you have to pick up the extra slack. Life's not fair. Do it. Do it. Do it, do it, do it. Your kids will know. Your kids will know. Either way, if you don't do it, they'll know, right? And there's no amount of explaining either of you can do to your children later to say why you didn't do a better job or something. They're going to know. So just whenever kids look back at their life and think about, like, how were my parents actually? Like, what did happen? They're going to replay this movie of their life. And all I can say is you had better fill that sucker up with a bunch of good things. Because if they replay it back and they see, I guess you really weren't there. You really just thought more about yourself. You really didn't address my needs. You really didn't understand what I was going through. Wow. That's just wow. Like, they're going to look back at that and have a realization, and there's nothing that you're going to say that is going to take that away or erase, because that's their experience. That's their honest experience of what happened. And so all I can say is you better fill that timeline up with good stuff, because eventually they're going to replay that, and that's when they'll find it. And you may get phone calls someday, the kids are 20 or even older. And a lot of times it happens sooner, it happened with me sooner. But kids will replay that movie of their life, and they'll see that and say, I've got the phone call myself. Hey, Dad, thank you. I'm just now starting to realize all the things you did, and I couldn't have made it without you. I couldn't have done this without you. Thank you. And folks, that's the moment you're parenting for. And there's nothing in that exchange that had anything to do with overnights or holidays, orthodontist bills, none of it. So getting rid of that conflict is all that matters, and focusing on the kids' needs. And so the problem with this standard of what's in kids' best interest can be weaponized. And, I'm a better parent. And so you're not that experience with the children. Let's say I am. So it's clearly in kids' best interest to be with the more responsible parent who's going to focus on their nutrition and all these things. And so I should get I should get more of the parenting time because of that, because that's what's in kids' best interest. And that assumes that that is what is in kids' best interest. And if you misunderstand what kids' needs are, which are probably at a rudimentary level more rooted in having a good connection with their sources, their mom and dad, then they want conflict-free, open, loving relationships with both of their parents more than they want focus on homework or nutrition or educational programming or whatever. Because if you have to fight for those things, then you have to factor in the cost of the conflict against the benefit of what you're arguing for. It's the same thing when you're evaluating legal fees for a divorce. You may spend 50 grand getting the spousal maintenance that you wanted or getting it reduced by the amount that you were hoping for, but that's only going to be replaced with your $700 a month legal bill for the next 4 years now. So what did you really win? And you got conflict. It's not satisfying, right? You didn't really get anywhere. So you really want to weigh the value of the conflict long term. And the problem is that you can't see it. Your kids don't come up to you and go, I just absorbed 3.7 points of conflict. At 10, I'm going to start thinking about suicide, just so you know I'm at 3.7 right now. So I just wanted you to know where I'm at. That's never going to happen. You don't know where that number is. They're most likely even going to try to hide it from you. They're going to internalize it because there's nothing they can do about it. They have no control. Kids have no control. They didn't ask for this. They can't change what happens. And so you just need to get that conflict out of there. And that's why I think that's the first and most important thing. So whether someone's a better parent or not, I look at it this way. You're in a 3-legged race as co-parents. And you're running down the field to, get through, maybe you'll finish ahead of some other parents. Your kids will do better. You're going to pass other parents who are squabbling about who should be leading or who should be doing what along the way. And you're going to pass them up. You're going to see parents that just whip past you and pass you up, but you're doing your best and you're moving down the field. And the thing that's holding you together is that strap in the 3-legged race. That's your kid. Think of it that way. So if one of you breaks free and says, I'm a faster runner, I'm going to go ahead, and you break the strap and you take off, you may get to the finish line first, but it's with a broken kid, right? It's you got to at least evaluate that potentiality, because to not do so might be the thing that opens you up to that very outcome. So you need to work together. And even if you come in 5th place or 10th place, but you finish the line, you cross the finish line with the band intact, your kid intact, man, that's a win. Look back on the field and see all the parents who couldn't do it. Look at all the kids that didn't even make it across the finish line. That's still a victory. Because I'll tell you what, there's always someone better than you. So if we want to use the kid's best interest as a really crude example of why this, to dramatize why this is not a standard you want to use with each other, there might be another family out there who makes more money than you, who's more intelligent than you, who, is more successful at things and have more to teach than you. They have more connections and schools and experiences for your kids than you do. Maybe it'd be in kids' best interest if they went and lived with those families. No. Doesn't that sound ridiculous? Because it's easy in that example to see what's important to the kids isn't that they can go horseback riding or whatever it is at that other family. It's, no, I want to be with my mom and dad. Remember that when you come into the parenting plan mediation, and that's what's important. So we another mindset thing here to think about is there's a lot of division in labor in marriage. It's actually one of the strongest points of being married is you can specialize in tasks. To take it back to a rudimentary caveman, cavewoman example, one of you could be specializing in hunting, the other could be in gathering. And so you divide up the labor so that it's better even than both of you doing the hunting and the gathering and sharing everything 50-50. Because if you both go hunting and the hunting's a bust, well, no one gathered, so you're starving. If you both went gathering and gathering's a bust, you're still hungry. But if one of you goes hunting and the other one goes gathering and the hunting's a bust, the gathering might be successful, you don't go hungry, and vice versa. So when you both do the same jobs, you have redundancy, but you don't have specialization and diversity. And it's that specialization and diversity that gives you the added chance of survival for the offspring, for your little cave baby, right? And so that's one of the most brilliant things that life has given us, is that division of labor, in my opinion. That's better than redundancy, for sure. And but that's a privilege. That's a benefit of marriage. That's a committed thing that you have the security to segregate and do together, because one of you is going to go hunt, in today's language, that's go earn money, and the other one's going to guard the cave and take care of the little one, which might be a homemaker, let's say. And the kid gets a lot of personalized attention, good for kid, let's say, and the other person focuses on career, makes a lot of money, and both of you now share the benefits of your division of labor. You have more money together, and you get to share in this happy, fulfilled, confident child. So that's something that changes when you get divorced. That's, a lot of people want to maintain the division of labor benefits outside of the security of a marriage and try to prolong that same modality in your post-decree divorce life. And that's where some problems might occur. That might look like having to adjust your parenting time, to allow the other person to have more time with them than you. Well, here's the way to look at it. What I've seen in most of the couples that I look at is the job that you had during the marriage, the specialization that you had, tends to be the thing that you are more possessive about in the divorce. So if you were a primary caregiver for the children, let's say, and now we're talking about, parenting plan, I've seen, like, let's say a father throws out 50-50 for parenting plan, and the look on the mother's face is like, not even close, man. Like, you were never there. Why do you get 50-50? And some of you may be nodding your heads right now internally. And then the conversation flips to support, maintenance, and child support. And now he's thinking, well, I'm thinking, he's thinking I think it should be this. And she's like, no way. It should be way more than that. Right. And he's like, well, you never made any money before. Why suddenly you want the money? Like, same thing, right? Why you never, participated that much in the kids' development. Why do you want them now? So, it can hurt both of them. And so the secret is you're both going to have to do the job the other one wasn't doing now that you're not going to be together anymore. So if you weren't that involved with the kids, you're going to have to get up to speed. You're going to have to get going. You don't have the benefit of that division of labor anymore. It may not be your thing, but go make it your thing. It's worth it. Learn how to meal plan. Learn how to help with homework. If you have to take a math class to help them get through algebra, go do it. Go be a benefit to your kids that way and get up to speed. If you were the one that, didn't have to worry about a career making money, well, maybe now you need to. You need to take care of yourself. You don't have the protection of that marriage anymore. So you got to, and to do that, you can't be, parent 80% of the time. So you're going to have to share with each other and let go of things and support each other in transition. And so that is a real conscious thing to think about before you come in and decide the parenting plan, I think, or at least evaluate it and see if it's an area that needs to be fleshed out more. The other thing is, you want to be really honest about your commitment and your capabilities from that transfer from the division of labor model to the co-parent model. We're doing everything, all the jobs now. Both sides are doing all the jobs, because it can also happen where, because we're only focused on the things that are in front of us, which is overnights, we know that leads to child support. We're looking at, mutual decision making. Most of us are, at least in the zeitgeist out there, we're very aware that there used to be a thing called custody and visitation. So in the old days, usually one parent would get custody and the other parent would get visitation. And today it's just a parenting plan. Like, how are you going to share time? Very flexible. Could be 50-50, week on, week off. Could be a variety of different plans that allow you to swap time back and forth. How are you going to make decisions? What's the plan? And it could be very different for each family. So, but everyone knows that there's these metrics that they come in with. And if they walk out, they got to go, with less than 50-50, or hopefully they get more. They get most of the overnights and they avoid maintenance, or they get a lot of maintenance, depending on which side you're on, right? And they walk back to their family and say, yeah, I got most of the kids' decision making and most of the parenting time, and the other party's really paying a lot in child support. They're gonna be like, all right, you won, good job, right? And so if you come back and say, yeah, I actually don't have majority of time, I don't have a lot of child support, and I got to go, deal with that now, you're probably going to get, oh, that sucks. You got screwed over, And the thing is that you're always going to hear that stuff, and it does not matter, because their situations aren't your situations to begin with. Like, they may have had the wrong thing happen in their situation. There's things that went on in their situation. That's why their spousal maintenance or child support was so high. When we met, maybe it wasn't as high. There's reasons that aren't evident in there, either from a legal perspective or from a dynamic in the negotiations or with that couple, that you just can't possibly know, and they may not even remember or be that well aware of. So when people are going to say things to you, take it with a grain of salt. If it's valid, then use that feedback. But if you know you did the right thing, don't let what other people are going to think about you to cause you to make the wrong decision in the mediation. So, for example, let's say you travel 75% of the time, you're not going to even be able to be a parent, but you're very, very well, you make more money. And with 25% of the parenting overnights, you're going to have a lot of child support. And the thought of you working on the road and traveling while the other person gets the kids, and you pay them all this money, it's like you're paying for them to have this time and you're slaving away at it. It's not going to happen. I want 50-50. Okay. And so you fight for 50-50. And this I've had cases like this. And so someone will fight for it. And everybody knows this person's not going to be available 50% of the time. So let's say they get what they want. And what happens the 25% of the time that they have the kids, but they're not even available? Do they just sit and watch TV? Are they home alone? Or they have a babysitter? Are they in daycare? Like, family member watches them just so you can have the 50-50 overnight badge of honor? So we really want to be upfront with our capabilities. Sometimes the division of labor is that way because the other person really does not have an interest in really participating in the development of the children. They have no inherent natural inclination to do that. And so they may be very happy with you taking on those responsibilities, and they're happy to, pay the support for that privilege. And if so, fine. If that's what you both agree to do, as long, and see, the benefit of this is that if that's what you both agree to do, there's probably no conflict with that. That's why that should be the case. So, let's just be honest, right? As if you say you're going to be 50-50 and you really aren't, we're just going to have a big problem later, right? And the kids are going to see that. And now that 25% that they're with you, that they expect you're going to be present with them, and you're not, you think they're going to look at that 50-50 overnight number and say, well, you won, good job. No, they're going to say, I feel like I'm ignored half the time I'm here. So you really want to think about some of these things before you come in and ask for things. I'll tell you a quick story. This was really powerful. This is something that made me a better parent literally the next morning. I was a consulting practice manager for a long time, and I had a lot of direct reports under me, and I was responsible for career development. And we had a lot of travel. We would typically come, the travel schedule was come in late Friday night and leave Sunday, which left someone at home with their family, usually on a Saturday. And at that point, you're switching out the suitcases and you're jet lagged and it's been a grind of a week. So you're really not fully there anyway. Maybe you, do a little something with the family, kiss the wife or husband on the head and, kiss the kids goodnight and whatever. And you're back on the road again. And I had a lot of people come to me after a while saying their marriages were in trouble and you need to get me off the road, Tom. And so I would look at the schedules and do the best I could. And it was a struggle. And so there were many people who were, at that point, you got to quit your career if you want to save your marriage. So I had people who were handing in resignations and other people who went through the divorce and say now they got to work even harder to pay off their support and stuff. And no one's happy. And so all that is going on. And one of the founders of our company, I knew him, knew his family, and they were fine. And he travels about 90% of the time. And I thought, okay, they're not faking it. They really are fine. The kids are doing great. Wife's doing great. He's doing great. Everyone's great. What's going on? And so we went to do a pre-night interview session at CSU one night many years ago. And I happened to be in the car with him alone and we drove up there and, hour-long drive to get there. And so I said, can I ask you something? And I asked him about this thing. Why is it that everyone I see is struggling? And why is it that your family's doing great and you travel more than the people who are having these troubles? And he, of course, explained to me that the reason that his marriage is so successful and his wife and kids are so happy is because he's gone most of the time. And, of course, we chuckled and he said, look, here's the truth. It's easy. When you're home, be home. Don't pull out the laptop and work some more. Don't not be putting your family first. Because if you don't put your family first and they feel like they're not that important to you and then you leave, they get a certain message that you're leaving because, they're not that important to you. He said, but if you put your family first when you're home and they feel it, they don't mind you leaving because they know where they stand with you and that you're doing what you have to do. And I got to tell you, if these words hit you and you adopt that right there alone, your life will change. I implemented a change in my parenting the very next day and I kept it. I was one of those people who would whip out their laptop after dinner and catch up on some things and try to get ahead of tomorrow's work. And, it wasn't real. I'll try to be fair. There were times where I would ask the kids, can you keep it down? Can you go play in the other room? I'm trying to get some stuff done here. That came out of my mouth. And after I spoke to, this gentleman and I thought about what he said, I came home and I realized what I was doing. And we were still together. We weren't divorced yet. And I immediately stopped doing that behavior. And I put away the laptop and I got down and played with my kids and I tickled them and gave them, pony rides around the living room and just engaged with them and goofed off. I had a great time. We had a blast and I got really closer to them instantly. And I'd just go in the next morning and say, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared for the meeting. Something came up. I'll get it to you at 1. How's that? And most people were like, okay, fine. 1's fine. I wasn't ready either. And I realized, I took a real big change that day to improve my life. And I then changed all the travel schedules for all my consultants. I called up their respective companies they worked for and said, we're changing our travel policy. We're not flying out on Sunday anymore. They're flying in Monday, and they're leaving earlier on Friday. So the goal is to be home. Monday and Friday are travel days. They'll be there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or they'll be there Tuesday, Wednesday, leave on Thursday. But the days of flying out late Friday after putting in a full day's work and leaving, Sunday so they can be there first thing Monday morning, those days are over. And I felt like we were going to lose a lot of business, but to my surprise, all the clients said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah, really." And they said, "Oh, thank goodness." I was like, "What?" And they said, "Yeah, because in order to be ready for you on Monday, I had to work all day Sunday from here, so I was ready for you. So if you're not coming in until basically Tuesday morning or late Monday, I can have the weekend with my family." And I said, "Have everybody do this." And we changed culture. Isn't that amazing? One little conversation, a car ride, changed culture, corporate culture like that. That's crazy. So more importantly, it changed things with my kids, and I never went back. I always put them first. So that's just an example of what I'm talking about. Like, there's more to this stuff than who gets the kids Tuesday night or Friday night. There's a lot more to think about. So things that are important are getting rid of conflict, making the plan so it works for your natural abilities and natural tendencies together. So as you work through the decision topics in the parenting plan, it's going to come across, maybe there's probably a lot of ways to do it, but when I work with people, I create what's called a decision matrix, which is a list of parental topics that are designed to create a continuum of the kinds of things that either parent can do unilaterally, legally have the authority to execute that decision when the kids are with them. That might be like bedtimes, haircuts, let's say, chores, allowances, things like that. Or what is going to be a mutual decision, which means legally the parties must come together, fully agree on that before it's implemented. That might be medical decisions, school changes, sports, tattoos, firearm usage, driving privileges, things like that. And so one of the things that's going to be really important to figure out, because there's different levels of, there's different kinds of parenting approaches out there. Let's talk about that real quick. There are collaborative and cooperative parents. You've probably seen these. Maybe you are one of these couples. If so, congratulations. You are the smaller percentage of people who are like that. These are couples who tend to not argue or get over it quickly. Focus on the problem, not the person. Focus on the behavior, not the person. Concede a lot in the interest of moving things in a productive way. Ego's not so involved. It just works really, really well. As these people, even after the divorce, they even tend to stay best friends or good friends. They may even get remarried, and then their new partners become best friends. They vacation together. It is amazing to watch, and it must be even more amazing to experience, because that wasn't me. But that approach to parenting, you ready for this? I don't want you to be shocked. So kids do well with that. All right. So, but that's not most people. So you may not naturally be that way, but if you work on it, you can do what's called co-parenting. So that means you still work together, but it takes a little effort, right? You have to think about communicating and really intentionally maintain respect and, remind yourself about what's important and make sure you do concessions and work at it. The good news is that studies have been done that kids who come from cooperative and collaborative parenting styles who are very successful at school activities, scholastically, emotionally, all those things, look exactly the same as kids who come from successful co-parenting households where the parents have figured that out. They're indistinguishable. So if you don't naturally have that kind of personality and you can put a little work into it, you can have the same results. The kids' performance and outcomes are indistinguishable from the collaborative, cooperative parents. So that's really good news. You can still, with a little work, achieve that. And then that's the majority of parents. At least they have the potential to do that. I'll put it that way. Then there's the parents who just are not going to agree. They fight about stuff that doesn't even need to be fought about, right? They're very conflictive parents. So big surprise here. You ready? Kids don't do well with that. Conflict bad. So what you can do there, though, is adopt what's called a parallel style of parenting, which means, hey, when the kids are with you, you do your thing. When you're with me, I'll do my thing. And at least there's no conflict. And kids can work out things are this way at mom's house, this way at dad's house, easier if the consistency within those homes is sound, but the homes aren't consistent. So the rules are different. And, that's more navigatable than parents are fighting. So you need to figure out where you're at. I guess where you're at and where you'd like to be, and are you able to get to where you'd like to be? Because some people would like to be collaborative and cooperative, but they're conflictive and they just have no hope without a lot of work. And some people are, conflictive, but with a little work and a little focus could be co-parents and get those really great results. So be honest in your assessment, and how that's going to affect the decision-making could be something like this. Collaborative, cooperative parents might make a lot more things mutual, which means they have to work together to come to a outcome for the children. But because they have a rich, substantial, established history of doing that, the risk of them not being able to perform that in the future is low, and the benefits of them doing it are high. So maybe more of those decision types, even little things like allowances or, screen time or, things like that might be mutual, so that the kids have this consistency plan between both households. Consistency is good. That really helps kids feel safe and that things are normal. So that can be very helpful. And so you might make things more mutual. Like I said, if you're co-parenting, you might make the really important stuff mutual and the rest of the things that you naturally kind of line up on mutual, and let the rest go day to day, for example. And then if you are conflictive, you might just carve out the super important stuff like the educational decisions, the medical decisions, things like that, and leave everything else day to day. So if it's really important, you're going to have to deal with each other. The stakes are high. It's worth doing it. Everything else, let it go, and be able to let it go, especially if you had that division of labor where it's really hard for you to let it go. Again, think about the role of conflict that you want to have, because you control that. You control that. You can change your behavior tomorrow and change the amount of conflict in your kid's life. That is something that you can eventually have some ability to turn the volume knob down on. So, but in the parenting plan, by how we make those decisions are going to be important so that they resonate with the style out there. So you can imagine if we made everything mutual, what a disaster that would be. They're already fighting about everything, and now they legally have to agree in order to get anything done. What a disaster. So that's some of the nuance that comes in. So having the right mindset will help frame how we make those decisions together more, effective for the situation that you're in. So things that are not important: overnights, holidays. I just did a podcast with four girls who are between the ages of 21 and 31. And I asked them the question, what was something that your parents thought was super important, but turned out to be not important to you at all? Like what would an example of that be? And all four at the exact same time said holidays. So people would say, it's my birthday, you need to be with me on my birthday. Or we need to make sure that we I get Christmases or this or that. Like, the kids don't care, really. They want to just be with their parents. So if you celebrate Christmas on December 2nd, knock yourself out. Have a fun time. Who cares about the 25th? The kids won't. So what's not important? Most of the numbers and things that you come into the parenting plan mediation prepared to fight for. The overnight count, kids don't care. Holidays, kids don't care. Child support, kids don't care. What they care about is that you two got your stuff together and they had a childhood where they weren't locked up dealing with conflict and were able to grow and not be stuck in that and go be, good adults now. So knowing what's not important is also important when you come into the parenting plan. Because from the kids' perspective, they have different needs than you do, and they have different problems than you do. And so we really need to understand that. And understanding the kids' behaviors is going to be really important. Now, the parenting class is going to help you with a lot of this stuff. So we'll talk about in the next part of this, we're going to cut this off at part 1 here. And then part 2, we're going to discuss the parenting after divorce class. And should you take that class before your parenting plan mediation? There are certain instances where I would say if you can answer yes to some of these questions, you should definitely do that before you have the parenting plan mediation, or at least have that pre-mediation parenting class that I'm going to put together more directly to address those things. And then there are certain cases where I'd say, I think you're going to be okay. We can have the mediation without that. And the reason I feel comfortable with that, in my case anyway, is that I have taught that class. I've created some classes and I'm through it all. My kids are, older into their adult lives, and I've seen the long-term consequences and benefits. I've seen what's important, what's not important. All the kids are successful, so it's not an accident. And those things, I know what they are, and I help parents put that into their plan. So we want to make sure that we have really thought through things or are able to think through things to put together a plan that not just ticks off numbers and time, but actually represents good expectations and thinks through in an intelligent way your level of conflict and things like that to produce a good plan for the kids. So from the kids' perspective, what's important to them is protected, and they'll feel safe and they'll love you for it. Last point here before we take a break and end part 1 of this is from a legal perspective, the proper mindset. So there's a challenge here coming into this mediation typically, because on one hand, I'm going to say there's two objectives that are almost diametrically opposed that we have to simultaneously resolve, and it feels a little odd. So on one hand, I'm going to say, how are you successful? What makes you successful? What are your natural tendencies? Can you agree on technology and screen time and, homework, but you disagree on nutrition, for example? Well, okay, let's carve out the nutrition part as something we're not going to focus on. And the other things you agree on, can we make those mutual so that you can have continuity, the kids have continuity, and the things that you're not naturally good at, let's not force you to be mutual on those. Because a lot of people think, well, the other person's not good at discipline or nutrition, so we need to make that mutual. And that's kind of code for so that I can have control in their home, i.e. for the benefit of the kids. Okay, cool, but that also is going to create a lot of conflict. The reason you're getting divorced isn't so you can have your your co-parent, meddling in how you manage your life on things you already know you don't agree on. That's not going to feel good. So that's going to ramp up conflict. It's going to make people passive aggressive and bitter and resentful. And kids are smart. They see it, and it's not going to help them. So we want to make sure that the plan is put together in a way that is going to be conducive to that. And then, like I said, from a legal perspective, we're going to be also looking at the plan while we're looking at what's going to be successful. We're also going to be looking at what happens if you aren't successful. So if everyone did what they said they were going to do, we would never need an agreement to fall back on, and we would never need an authority to hold us accountable to that agreement, because you'd always do what you said you were going to do. Even when times got tough or found it impossible, you'd still find a way to come through and do your part of the agreement. So, but life isn't like that. And so we need the agreements to hold us accountable to this is what we agreed. We agreed that we would both make the decision on firearm usage or therapy. And you're not doing that. You need to be held accountable. We need to make that decision together. It's not your sole decision to decide that for both of us. So from a legal perspective, the plan is going to be worded such that this is the legal expectation, and that if you don't, the whole purpose of the plan is when you don't have an agreement in the future on a topic, the plan should definitively guide you to an outcome. So, for example, on vacations, if both parties want the same vacation, I put in a automatic tiebreaker that says, let's say mom gets preference in even numbered years and dad gets preference in odd numbered years. So if they come into a conflict in the future, 8 years from now, 10 years from now, and they both want the same time on that year and they're going to fight about it, well, the plan's going to say what is the year, even or odd numbered year, and that parent wins that argument that time. Done. And the plan's useful. The legality of it is useful. And you avoid having an argument about it because it's like it's already been pre-decided. So from a legal perspective, we want to make sure that when things don't go as they're supposed to go, that the plan has a definitive end. So we want specifics in there. For holidays, for example, I always get this kind of, parents shake their head and roll their eyes a little bit when I say, okay, for holidays, we need a specific start date and time. When I say time, so when does Thanksgiving start? And they're like, Thursday. And I'm like, no, what time? And why is that important? Well, 8 a.m., 10 p.m.? Well, they're like, no, not 10 p.m. It's too late. I'm like, so the time's important. And they're like, okay. So we want to make sure that we have specifics, because from the specifics, you can, by mutual agreement, the two of you deviate. But when you don't agree, it's Thursday morning, 10 a.m., end of story. There's no fight, no conflict. It's been pre-decided. And that keeps you out of the court. That keeps you from escalating the conflict. And so we want to make sure that the plan is comprehensive legally, as well as simultaneously supportive of your ability to be successful and reduce conflict. So it's quite a challenge to put all that in there. And so that's why coming into it completely unprepared, is going to limit your opportunities to that dimension of things. So that's why I put this episode together, is to let you know there's some things to think about here. So let's cap it here. So when we get back together, I'm going to discuss the Parenting After Divorce class, what's covered in the class, who should take the class, things like that. And then we'll talk about how to prepare for your mediation to get the most benefit out of the session, and when to stop, how far to go with that. And you don't want to do the whole thing. You don't want to show up with me with a 15-page document with incredible amount of detail and saying, we've thought through here, just adopt this. That's too far. There's problems with that. You want to get 75% of the way and then leave the rest open and come in and finish at the mediation. So we'll talk about how you prepare for the mediation so that you get the best benefit from working together and saving money outside and being organic with it, versus making things take longer inside by over-preparing. And that way you get the benefit of the mediator and all the things I've been talking about that can help bring the plan to a close. So all that stuff we'll talk about. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. This has been Tom Davis. Thank you for joining me today. Remember to protect every accomplishment you make together, and that setbacks are just wins in the making. Stay positive. The Pro Se Divorce Podcast is a production of Family Synergy Mediation. The information in these podcasts are opinions only and should not be considered legal advice. Visit myfamilymediation.com to learn more.